Hello there. Welcome to part 3 of this painting demonstration progress with you. And I'm not entirely sure that I know what I'm going to do with this painting or whether I'm even in the mood for painting, which makes it an ideal time to film. And I think that's sometimes part of the art practice, that you just show up and that you feel curious enough or open enough to what might happen on the canvas or in your sketchbook or however you're working, to just give it a go. I always find that showing up at the easel transforms the way I feel, even if I think beforehand, I'm really not quite sure whether I'm ready. and sometimes we're not. But this is part of the reason why I want to do these films for you and show the whole painting process. And I do the same with my online workshops, that a great deal of it, because I film everything in real time and leave the responsibility up to you as to whether you want to put me on double time and fast forward and leave bits out. But the real-time process, I think, is so important to share, because everything is done quick edits now and or slow-mo, and so you don't really understand how, like, the context of the creative process. And of course it varies for everybody, but being able to see a whole painting being done in real time. And with my online workshops there, I'm aiming for a much more realistic, albeit loose marked results, but I'm definitely looking to create landscapes which are really rooted in realism and getting that detail. But being able to share the uncertainty of the process and the being able to make changes as you're going, or understanding how to make changes or where to start if you feel like the painting is just not going where you want it to go. Obviously, this is quite a different animal. And these are the sorts of paintings I do for exhibitions and for sale. And it's my imaginative world. I never use photographs for any of my paintings. I haven't used reference photographs for years, unless I'm doing portraits or birds and I need to have them very, very detailed. But all of my landscape work now, I'm just making them up. But that is after years of painting landscapes from photographs and really looking when I'm out and about and understanding what it is that makes a landscape look and feel realistic enough for me to get lost in the painting. Because the stories that I'm telling in these paintings, even if I'm not particularly aware at the time of what the story is, and I said in the last video that you are part of this story now, and that is really cool. That's really exciting, that everything about every mark on this canvas, I'm aware of the fact that you've been there and you're part of this energetic process, which is quite something. But I've spent a long time looking, and I've spent a long time building up my confidence with the material. So I've done the seeing clearly stage of really looking at and understanding how we interpret light and shade to recreate realism. I've done that work. I've done the skills development. I feel confident with the material, but not to a point where anything is ever really certain. And that's what I love about the painting process when I'm working in this way. And I've said before that for me, so much of it is about the surprise of the color combinations that come out, the way that different techniques, different methods can create such unexpected and delightful results. And that sky up there is just so delicious. I'll bring you in close at the end to show you all the detail of what I do today. But the way that the paint has formed those random colour combinations, the streaks, the shapes, a tiny bit of it is controlled in that I knew what the colours were going to do when mixed together. If you didn't see that one, it was just a little bit of phthalo green, a bit of quin magenta and white. So I knew what the colours were going to do, but the way that I'm using the paint creates a random result, which gets me really excited. And so the paint play is something which is very important to me. And you will have your own reasons for why you're painting. And this is not so much a step-by-step tutorial, because so much of it is abstraction and random, which would be impossible for you to recreate. You know, the way that I just shook the green paint over the canvas and then made the dots into these potential tree forms. I mean, that's so random. You wouldn't be able to recreate that, but it might give you a little bit more confidence in just having a go, having a play, seeing what the material can do in a way that gets you excited. And so much of this process is about, for me, well, of course it's about storytelling and colour and playing with the material, but it's about taking risks. And this is just a painting. And I've had to remind myself of that at times when I've become too serious about what I'm doing, or I've got an exhibition to work for, and suddenly the pressure of the exhibition makes me feel like I have to strive for a certain level of perfectionism that maybe I wouldn't have if I was just playing in the studio. So be aware of the pressures or the drive that you feel within you when you're painting. I have to be aware of that as well. And I've got beyond the point now, although it took me years, of worrying about exposing the process and risking discovering that I actually don't know what I'm doing. Because I do know what I'm doing, but I don't know what the results are going to be. And that is something that I never had the confidence to share for years. It was only in 2019, not that many years ago, when I allowed my students to watch my whole process when I was painting a portrait. And that was a revelation, because I realized the power of sharing the ugly stages, the tentative stages, and the whole building up of confidence or self-awareness or insecurity through all of those different layers of practicing and pushing and pulling with a different painting to get the results that you want. And that was a realistic painting. It was a self-portrait. The one that's on the cover of the Seeing Clearly book, that was done with an audience. For almost all of it, 90% of it was done with an audience. And it completely changed the way I felt about the painting, because it was a shared process. And allowing myself to be completely vulnerable in front of an audience. And in the same way here, where, as I said at the top, you know, I actually don't know where this painting is going to go, but I've been spending a lot of time over the past 3 days. It's taken 3 days for that sky to dry. And even now there's a thick bit, which is still a little bit glossy, but I know I'm not going to be touching that. It's the humidity here. Even if it's warm, of course, if there's a lot of humidity in the air, then the paint is going to take a lot longer to dry. But 3 days, and that's acrylic. And I suppose it was quite thick. But I've just come to this point where, right, I've been looking at this for a long time. The area that I keep looking at is this section here and that section over there. And I feel like I need to just start making some marks and start addressing some of those issues, knowing all the time that I can go over, I can do additional layers, but taking that risk of putting some more paint on there and seeing what's going to happen. I have been in a situation myself, and I've seen it so many times, where there's a tentative quality or even a fear about of being afraid of ruining something that you've already done. And if I could say anything to myself and pass it on to you, if I could say anything to myself from 5-10 years ago, is just keep pushing, and don't be afraid of what you do on this canvas. It is just a painting. And once you take those small steps, those little risks, of course it could translate over then into the way you feel about taking little risks in life, having a new kind of conversation, using different language, just feeling a bit more confident about putting yourself out there and being slightly vulnerable and maybe making a mistake or maybe looking stupid, and who cares? You know, this is just all our ego. So many life lessons in a painting. Once again, it's completely woven together. So I've got my apron on today. Meow. So sorry, it's the humidity. My British self doesn't cope well with the humidity. I think I might have lost it, which is why I need to do some painting, just to ground myself in this painting process. And yes, kitties are here with me because clearly we're vertical as opposed to being flat on the floor and you looking down on the processes in the first two. So I will be using the paints in a slightly different way. There'll be less water, so it's not going to be dripping down quite so much. But the area in the painting that as I said earlier, I keep looking at is this section here. And I always say, take photographs as you go, so you can get distance perspective on the image that you're creating, and it gives you a whole new view of what the painting looks like and where you want to work further, because your eye will keep going to the places that need a little bit of additional work. Sometimes your eye will roam around the areas that you absolutely love. I'm loving these sort of pops of orangey yellow coming through the green. But most of the time, your eye will go to the section that still needs resolving. And one of the things that I'm discovering with this painting, because there is an element of realism to the light and the shade, what these dark shapes might end up becoming is the shadow in between or underneath or behind some foliage that comes in the front. But it's already changed my sense of where the light is coming from. I thought maybe the light was coming from this side at the start, but now I think the light is much more at the top middle. So it's coming down and bathing the valley in light in quite an even sort of way. But then the shadows behind, the shadows closest to us, and the light will be behind, which will allow for all of this shading to make sense. But it means that here, that probably, whoops, I don't want to do, I just stood on the corner of the easel. This shading would then make more sense if there's a hill or an object here that will be creating some shadow there. But that line is really bothering my eye, because if we're talking about realistic shadow, and I really like that line, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. But if that is shadow, if my brain is perceiving that as shadow, then there must be something here which is creating the shadow. So either that is a steep ravine in between these two blocks of land, but then maybe this needs to come out in front. So I'm not quite sure, but that's what I mean. The bits that you keep looking at in a work like this, where you're working from imagination or just allowing your creative self to experiment and play with the paints and see what happens, those are the areas which need resolving. And this could be a totally new kind of painting process to you, in a way of thinking that you've never considered before. And it's a great way to learn about colour and light and texture on it doesn't have to be this big. And I know that the consideration of paint cost is quite considerable. But when you're learning or when you're really trying to push your creativity, this is a great way to do it. And be curious and question and be unafraid to play. Because nobody is watching. And it's only a painting. But you need to just be comfortable with that. I'm just moving my stool out of the way, by the way. Right, let's get into this. Finally, they say. Okay, so off camera. Right, I have just prepared, these are solid versions of the fluid paints that I used the other day, except I don't have the green gold colour in a solid, so I can always mix that if I want to. But what I keep looking at in this area, the sense that that is a lovely valley, and maybe this is going to turn into a river. And I like that now almost looks like a waterfall coming through. There's going to be something exciting happening there. But I keep looking at that open space, and I can't decide whether I'm looking at the open space because I'm loving the open space, but I actually want to try and put in a little bit of a distance, horizon of perhaps some hill shapes to give it a little bit more definition there. And the sky created this amazing line, which I wasn't expecting. And that now I'm going to keep as a horizon of another landform in the distance. And I like that the sky is sort of vanishing into some really bright hill forms over there, but I feel like I need something here, maybe to join up with that. So I'm always going to be using the same colours. You actually get a little insight into the mixing process here. So if you are interested, I've got loads of free videos which show me colour mixing for different projects. So that is where I really explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and I'm more interested in showing you the practical application process rather than talking about the colours that I'm creating. But I am looking for something which looks like it's far away and has some sunshine, knowing all the time, oh, I've already gone through all my white. I can change and edit at any point. Let's see what this does. Always putting the paint on the canvas. And remember, if you saw the first two parts, I was talking about this being my colour mixing palette. And so I'm just going to get in your way slightly. Obviously, I'll be in your way occasionally. So let's see what happens if I start creating. So like that river is going round the corner, maybe some slightly rocky shapes. So pushing in that hill, using the palette knife to create a ridge of shape. Let's get a bit more green and yellow in there. There's a bit of a headland. So part is I'm going to have to bring my stool back to put my palette on and hang on to the canvas because it's going to tilt with the pressure of the knife. Have that vanishing off into the distance. Getting the layers. That's the palette knife, by the way. That's not me, if you're wondering. Oh dear. Yeah, it's the humidity. Sorry. All right. There we go. So already getting a sense of folding of layers. Always stepping back. Yeah, that's maybe becoming a bit almost too even and regular there. That's what I wanted. Scrape right through it. Oh, super. So you see how like that idea of filling something in and then just making a few marks I mean, look how that has totally transformed the picture just by putting in that little bit of distance and then creating this lovely shape that your eye goes to. And you know that, I'm assuming you know, that if you apply some acrylic paint and you don't like what you've done, you can actually get a sponge and wash it off. And the paint underneath will not rub off at the same time unless you've just done it. But if I really, really didn't like that, I would just get a sponge and some water and a cloth so the water didn't all drip down. But there's no point can you go wrong when you're using acrylics, because you can paint over, you can scrape it off, you can wash it off. It's fantastic. And that has, I mean, it's like a real curve down, but I like that. I like that. Right, let's just build in another ridge of that here. Now that I feel that, and that, oh, that's connecting with whatever those shapes are there. Sweet, like it. And you will notice that I'm using a palette knife. I actually use palette knife in pretty much everything that I do because I love the textural effects. I love the way that you see gaps in between things. It's just a tool I'm incredibly comfortable with because I love the results of it. Right, just bringing a little bit of this colour through those. You see how the eye instantly starts to fill in undulations in the landscape because of the way that we interpret and understand light and shade. And that is something that I will do a whole heap of extra short videos on when I'm out and about and just showing you what I'm talking about with noticing the landscape. But this is a really important part of recreating any kind of landscape work which has an element of realism. It's just understanding what your eye is seeing and why it's seeing it. And it's always to do with light and shade. Any kind of three-dimensional realism is about the play and the balance of light and shade. I'm just doing mysterious mixing here. It's easier on the stool down there. Just adding in a little bit of darkness to this side, a bit of extra depth and interest, perhaps as we're getting further away from the light source, but I don't want to cover up those lovely areas of gold. So that, yep, like that. I like that. So another bit over here with that deeper, slightly deeper tone, but a slightly lighter version as we're getting further away. A bit up there. So we're kind of grounding some of those shapes. Yes, interesting. Let's fold that over again. You see how the palette knife, it creates a ridge, a thick ridge of the paint as I scrape it away. And so I'm almost drawing with that, with the tip of it, which reveals the colours underneath, but also creates some really interesting layers. Now let's get a bit more orange in that to make a really delicious purple grey. As it essentially adding in shadows. It's constantly a case of stepping back, just having a little look. Now for me, that looks too regular. So anything your eye gets drawn to, address it. Let's just create it. That's better. Your eye is always drawn to a pattern. And if it doesn't make sense, if it feels too regular in a landscape situation where perhaps it should be more, well, look at that, it's created, I don't know if you can see from there, there's a little hole just from the way the palette knife has connected. So we've got this really interesting little hole in the landscape. Yep, I like those extra shapes. I'm just going to add a little bit more of a wobbly ridge across there. And again, it's much lighter in the tone because we're getting further away. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Yeah. That has completely changed the way I feel about that whole section. And it may be that this feels like too neat a line, but I'm going to leave that for now. Now, do I need to put anything up there? Now, I quite like that this starts to vanish into nothing, like there's a bit of misty cloud maybe happening over the top. Right, now, need to address the other side. Definitely. Let's step back and look at it from over here. That's made such a difference. Really interesting journeying up through there. And of course, whatever's happening with the light and the lake or the river or whatever it is at that end, I can always open this up. Okay, there we go. There. Sometimes you just got to make the mark. You know, I was talking about that bit. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to cover up that lovely shape. Well, that looks like a figure now. That's really interesting. Right, what colours have I got here? Let's use similar colours on that side. This may not be turning into a rocky mountain, but let's have a look. Bit of extra purple in there just to change up the tone. Okay. Well, that is a very different colour because I've run out of yellow on my palette. Now, how is that going to affect this side? It's certainly going to make it look like it's a lot closer because the colour is so strong. So let's make it closer. So it's thinking, just adapting as you go, but a great deal of this adapting is because of the experience I've got with using the colours and knowing, you know, why something is going to look closer and then what to do about it or look further away. So instantly, you know, my knife is wanting to create almost a touching of those two bits of the landscape there. So possibly I'm going to need to bring the white back in to zigzag between the two. Or maybe there isn't a river at all and maybe this is a lake and it's actually contained. But I quite like this colour. And because of all the layers underneath, I'm going to need to put this down and hold the canvas again. Because of all those layers of colour underneath, we can get amazing patterns emerging. That's really quite a nice pink. Let's go vertically down. Pull that down to give a different plane. Already starting to encroach on those dark shapes that I blew in with the straw. I think maybe that sort of pinky tone is perhaps not working as well as expected. So let's get some, oops, dropping the lid of the yellow. Let's get some more yellow back in. And white. Right, here we go. Because I really do like those tones, those colours. I think they work extremely well. So putting a heap more white and some yellow. Let's put it over quite thickly. Let's try something different, slightly different approach on this side. Just a little bit of green. Unify the sides. I'm going to then scrape back into this. Just get some good thick paint going. Bit of orange. much darker on that side. Again, I am thinking about where the light is, and that if the light is coming from up there, and this is quite a dramatic hill, then it's probably going to be considerably darker. Right. Okay. Whoop, big splat of paint on the floor. Don't stand in that, Charlotte. Okay, now I've got some layering up, and I want a contrast between the dramatic sky up there, which is partly why I've started making this much lighter. And now I'm going to scrape in with the palette knife again, in the same way that I did on that side, getting some ridges happening down here. This side, it's often, you know, I find very often one side of the painting comes together so much more easily than the other. I couldn't possibly tell you why that is. Right, see, scraping that away. Now, is this actually going to just become another sloping series of hills, or does this want to be rocks like it did the other day? So let's just go with the hill for the time being, and bring it down here. I don't want to lose too much of that incredible dark splatter. But again, sometimes when your hand just goes to a certain area, it's easier now, I've discovered, just not to question it. You know, there might be a reason, you know, once you're kind of in the zone, or I'm not particularly concentrating because I'm chatting to you, and I feel like, you know, my creative knowledge is almost making decisions over and above my ego, and I'm just to go with it. Yeah, I'm actually liking that I can scrape further now into this, getting some really interesting lines. And these textures that get built up will then, I can work over the top of those if I feel that it needs to completely change mood again. Right, scrape off some larger areas. I'll just bring some of that down here. So this is definitely now becoming quite a shaded area. Yeah, there's some mysterious sort of forest or something happening there. Just fill in some of those gaps and bring a little bit of, you know what, I'm getting the urge now, since I was talking about it earlier, get my sponge out. Right, let's just rub away some of that. It's not entirely working in the way that I imagined, but actually that layer of grey and lilac will create a whole new level of layering. And so much acrylic painting is about the layering. See what I mean? You can actually wash it off. If you want to. It's almost like there's something mysterious happening over here that I haven't quite got my logical head round yet. Right, I feel like this section now is almost completely resolved for the time being, and that has made a huge difference, just deciding to try something. They're risking that, and it's worked really, really well. And that feels like a really good day's painting to just have created that little section. I feel much happier with the way that this whole part of the painting is coming together. And this area, I think I need to spend a little bit more time making some decisions about what to do. But equally, I am also feeling compelled. I know I'm off camera. I'm just getting a little bit more orange. I just feel like I need to make some decisions or make some marks. Get more white here. You can appreciate the painting from a distance while I'm out of the view and think what you would do. Let's go with some shapes. Ooh, look at that. God, I love that orange so much. It's a really beautiful pinky. Let's cut back through some of those dark areas with some light. Bring back a little bit of this, remembering why I'm doing it, because I just love the colour and the play. So don't be afraid to keep playing with the colour. I can always go back in with the dark. So putting some of this pink tone back through, creating some dramatic movement. Okay, so this is no longer quite as dark. That's the plastic underneath, if you can hear all kinds of swishing going on. Bit of white. There's a bit of white happening there. Yeah. So this section is obviously now catching the light. Maybe it comes around there. Following more definitively the contour of the land, that it will be flat. I've obviously, some part of me has decided that this is a definite valley, and I'm wanting to use the layering, the interesting layering underneath and the colours, but actually creating something here has overridden any other decision making, putting this brightness and this light in, and then I can readdress what's going on with the shadows. Yeah, that is starting to make a lot more sense to me. There was something, I love that there's a great deal of room for the imagination, but, this may not stay pink, but creating a realism of a story with, clearly this is becoming one of my Odyssey paintings again, with that journey, the journey of the hero, you know, going through a magical landscape and having to watch out for the pitfalls. There we go, a little bit of bright orange coming back in. That feels better. You know, sometimes it's just that little click of, oh yeah, right, I'm really glad I tried that. Now maybe through there is going to need to be some additional dark, bit of shading. If I'm still thinking about, there we go. I'm still thinking about my realism, my lights and my darks, and where the overall source of light is coming from. But maybe it's not going to need much more detail than that, and that very definite sort of valley. I might bring a little bit more of green back in there. I've just run out of green on my palette, that's the only thing. And I think sometimes I just, now having made some serious changes to this side, which I wasn't expecting, I'll probably need to, now that is becoming too regular again, isn't it? So let's cut across that. I think I probably need to allow that to sit now and for me to think about it. That's better. I like that ridge. I like that ridge, she says as she completely changes it. Oh, there we go. That was worth doing. I do believe in just pushing it a little bit further. Scratch, scratch, scratch. And something it's going to need to happen down here. But again, this could be the introduction of some green, bringing some trees further in. Or just adding in a bit of shading of something down in this section of the valley. But you see how I'm now very much compelled to be following the rules of what will be happening on this plane of the land. That's the realist in me coming through, but equally that is the kind of painting that I'm striving for. Suggestive, but also very much rooted in, oh, that's an interesting shark fin that just popped out. Well, we'll leave that. Yeah. Well, what's happened there is, yes, so that was interesting and relatively unexpected. But what has happened is that I have created a symmetry in some sense with the style, and that still looks a lot more dramatic than the soft hills here. So the idea that I had originally about that maybe being mountain ranges or very rocky, there's a suggestion of that with the colours and the vertical lines. But equally, I mean, using just those 4 colours that I had on my palette, getting such different results and those beautiful pastel tones which just really say something to me. I mean, that is a huge part of the process. If I feel, the process for me, that is, if I feel that the sky is competing too much with this landscape, I might lighten the landscape slightly so that stands out as very dramatic. But at the moment, it probably is quite well balanced to a degree. Having said that, I've just got a bit of pink on my palette knife. I'll just bring that over on this side just to get a tiny bit of the same colour over there. But that has resolved the whole horizon issue that I had before that I was talking about. So think about giving your paintings plenty of space to pause and always then addressing the area that you keep looking at. So I'm going to put you on pause and bring you up close just so you can see some of the marks I made in this installment. And hopefully you'll join me for the next stage of the process. I need you there because you're part of the painting now, okay? So I'll see you shortly. Okay, so getting you up close now. You can see the incredible, random, beautiful colours and shapes from the sky that we did the other day. And this is the work I've just been doing just now. See how the palette knife creates those ridges, which give the illusion of landscape forms. That was the hole that I was talking about, created a really interesting like cave, or not a cave, an opening. See how just the play of light and shade gives our eye the impression of the illusion of folds and forms in a landscape. It's just magic, but that is from a great deal of looking and seeing and understanding how those forms can be recreated in paint. So looking again, you can see there's far more complexity to the layering on this side. And we've got a clear ridge against the sky and how I've scratched through, and you can see the colours that were underneath there. Again, you can see the thickness of the paint from the palette knife being scraped away, and again, there's a shark fin. All those really, really interesting shapes unfolding. So that has been a very successful transition today, and we'll keep working on that hopefully tomorrow. See you soon.